Hello, my name is Jerry Fielka. Today is June 20, 2023. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today with Robit Hairman. Robit, where in the heck you calling in from?
I'm Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. I'm in Venice. So first question is,
I'm a patriot of Venice. I lived there for many, many years.
Beautiful. First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
The best thing for a human being? Kindness.
I love that word. I rarely get that. Thank you.
I think of Aldous Huxley, said, after all these years of, painful research and exploration, really, it's, almost disappointing to discover that the key to it all is human kindness.
Love it. So well put, so simple and easy. Let's do it. So what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Rhyme, songs.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Why do they? That's a very broad question. Humans have this built-in symbolic system, called the unconscious. And my favorite, Lacan has the best description of it. He says, the unconscious is not some pre-rational jumble of images, but a well-organized symbolic system, which we choose to ignore. And that's the key statement is at the end there. We choose to ignore it. We all know that there's this underlying symbolic system, and we all know what symbols we, respond to, but we put it out of our minds so to function in society. I don't know if you knew Oscar Janiger, who was one of these early LSD psychiatrists, gave thousands of people acid in the 1950s, completely legally. Anyway, Oz said that, we have a sort of schizophrenic society where we have the private line and the party line. And, so we keep our symbols to ourselves, and we say things that we think will, give us transactional advantage in the world. A lot of salesmanship is sort of ideology, really.
It's well put what you said there, Robert, because I do know of Oscar, especially his giving Lord Buckley acid and many others, and a lot of what you just talked about we're going to touch on. You've anticipated a lot of the topics. So do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
Is it more innate or more invented? It's a good question. I think it's innate,
Yeah.
I mean, animals collect information as much as us, but just in different forms. I take my little dog for a walk, and he's checking out every poll for a Facebook post or something, and he leaves his own posts there,
Yeah.
Doggy. He's got a great advantage on that level. He's got like 100,000 nose neurons, and we've got about 6,000 to 8,000. So.
Wow. And so, do thoughts create emotions?
I think it goes both ways,
Yeah. Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I.
That's Allen Ginsberg's line. He says that you learn what you know in the act of saying it.
Oh, wow. See, I don't know that. See, I know it because McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion
says, very similar.
Yeah, and Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it.
Really?
Yeah. No, it's endless. There's a lot of different, for 40 years asking that questions, I've gotten a lot of different answers, but I never knew the Ginsberg line, so I really appreciate that. I'm always trying to learn more with these questions. The next one is, can humans think without language?
I don't know. That reminds me of a Marvin Minsky line. He says, you cannot think about thinking without thinking about something.
That is great.
Yeah.
But
He anticipated the internet. He wrote this book called The Society of the Mind.
yeah,
He sort of theorized that the mind, is not a sort of collection of entities. It's like a society with, in social interaction between the parts of our mind.
yeah.
And
Well,
a lot of sort of modern computing is sort of derived from some of those principles.
well, yeah, that was what year? I mean, in 1939, James Joyce invented whatever's going to be after the internet and disguised it as a book, Finnegan's Wake.
Finnegan's Wake, yeah, wow.
Yeah, that's like, we don't even know what's going to be after the internet, but he invented it because, anyways, Chomsky says a language is not just words, it's culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Me personally,
Yeah.
language doesn't break down for me.
Yeah.
I love language,
But I'm saying, like, you're at the grocery store and you're talking to a clerk, or just there's some sort of communication breakdown. What do you
there are other forms of communication other than words. I mean, language can, my friend's doing a soundtrack for a silent movie, and it's really interesting of how that works, because that's like, tell the story without actual language. Well, you've got language, but the title cards are, occasionally placed in, but it's mostly gesture.
Yeah.
I suppose you can pretty much communicate most sort of small things, like transactional things like that, just with gestures, I'm sure.
Gesture, yep, that's good. But your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
They're so linked. It's, I don't know. It's hard to distinguish between the two.
Well, I agree, because humans invented the words feeling and thinking, so we think we can separate them, but they're so interconnected we can't really.
We think we can separate them, we think.
Yeah.
We don't know.
The answer.
It's just like the same problem all musicians have. Like you got to dump in a genre, Like,
yeah,
I play music that's at least 7 or 8 different genres. We
yeah,
write songs. I mean, I'm devoted to songs. A good song in any genre is a good song.
I agree.
And we run into this issue with having to be lumped into a particular niche.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to get into music too. And it's funny because most people I ask, are we more thinking or feeling beings? They go, I think we're more feeling beings. That's literally how 80% of people answer that. So
I feel we're more thinking beings.
I love that answer. I've actually had a friend who counters it often. So these are 2 questions from Alan Turing, 1950s. First, is thinking a function of the soul?
No. I mean, I do meditation and yoga meditation, and thoughts sort of often interfere.
Yeah. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
They're doing a pretty good job of it at the moment. Depends what they can think, you know. You know, they can only think about what's extent, you know, like Chat GPT is basically like it's very good at imitating. Basically, it's not that it doesn't actually understand its own output.
Right. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
This comes back to Oz, you know. Oz. He says, you know, when people ask me about the meaning of life, they say what they really mean is the feeling of life.
Wow.
If you feel good, life is meaningful. If you don't feel good, there is no meaning, you know. That sort of nails it, you know.
It does. And Robert, I'm curious. I got the question from Viktor Frankl's, who wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning. And he says, happiness doesn't necessarily last, but meaning does.
Well, I mean, meaning, you mean like larger purpose in a way. Is that what you mean by meaning?
Well, that's funny because I mean, this whole conversation is me and you versus the wording on the questions and how I perceive these words and how you perceive them. So Lily Tomlin said, reality is just a collective hunch. So it's like we both have sort of a hunch what we mean as humans when we say the word meaning. Just like, you know, when I ask the Turing question, is thinking a function of the soul? 85-90% of people go, depends on what you mean by the soul. So
right.
It's constant.
These are arbitrary words, you know.
Right,
actually,
but
when you use the word reality, I react quite, because I'm actually writing a book right now called Reality.
Yeah,
and it's about reality in LA. You know, we have a lot of different kinds of reality in LA. You know, we have, you know, the reality of like rocks and stones, and then we have, you know, the reality of the internet, which is these fictional friends. And then we have manufactured realities. You know, we have like all these people trying to define what reality is.
Right.
And trying to tell us that, you know, their version of reality is actually the one that's true. Whereas, you know, there's, and then we have, you know, reality television, which is by normal definitions not very real at all. You know,
yeah, my friend used to write for reality television. I was gonna say, doesn't that defeat?
What do you write?
Yeah, what do you write? But here's the question: is perception reality?
Not necessarily, I wouldn't say. You know,
Yeah,
it's perception. You know, it depends on what you're seeing, I guess. I'm a big fan of the sort of uncertainty principle, I must say.
Oh yeah.
That applied to, you know, humans. I mean, when someone's staring at you from the back of a room and you notice it or you feel it, what are they transmitting? You know, what are those waves? That's something I'm very curious about. You know, there's like and there's also, you know, there's other realities, as anyone who's taken acid or, you know, DMT or something has realized, you know, there are more things in this reality than dreamed of in your philosophy. You know, old Hamlet Robert. So, you know, reality is a very tricky word.
Yeah. Well, all words are sort of tricky, and we can find a commonality in the conversation because the next one is something you already touched on a little, is does the brain more detect consciousness consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
I think it's both. It's genetic and it mutates, and it grows in different directions. I worked on this CD-ROM for this guy in London called Steve Jones, who's a geneticist at City University in London, and his book was called The Language of Genes. Basically, it's which basically basic idea is that your genes contain your cultural history, your entire cultural history, not just the verbalizations of it, but, all these like little cells that form into actual symbols, replicate the pictures in the outside world. Then we project them later, basically. So it's, I guess you're sort of, I must be, sort of perturbed about how I react to just about every definition here.
Oh, no. I'm welcoming. Because I ask a question where it's either or, it doesn't mean you can't say both. I'm open. I'm open to it all. I mean, I just appreciate your time and exchanging ideas. Most of the questions aren't so much this dichotomy kind of thing. Some of the beginning ones are, but
I'm anti-binary. I think that's
no, that's fine.
My political position. And
no, that's actually what I'm more after is awareness level. The question is just the prompt. You don't have to answer the question. It's just
jumping. I understand that.
It's just jumping off points. But I mean, the next one is another, and there are a couple more binary, but what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
I have no idea.
See, that's okay. The other thing is saying you don't know is okay. I'm not trying to put you on the spot or
that's fine. I'm happy to just
no,
I've never really thought about the speed of I think about the speed of light, which is pretty fucking fast.
And
the speed of thought, I think it depends on who's thinking. Some people think very slowly, and I find that a bit annoying. To be honest.
Well, the poet Audre Lorde said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Wow. Well, I think, these new tools are really extant in the web, There's a lot of communication has sort of been ripped from, the centralized base in a way. And the sort of new paradigm is decentralized. I always think one of these days I'd like to start a movement called the Decent movement. It's like, just because ever since I read that Wilhelm Reich book, The Mass Psychology of Fascism.
Yes.
And, that's our biggest problem is the mass organization of society. It should be decentralized. Power should be decentralized. If everyone gets their own power source on their roof, that's an important part of decentralization. If power, if we spread wealth a bit more egalitarian, in a bit more of an egalitarian way, that would be a decentralization. It's shocking, actually, how power and money have become centralized, in very few people.
It really, go ahead.
No, that's just sort of, conditions, revolutionary conditions that have been predicted many times.
It really resonates with three of my mantras: is center without margins, museum without walls, and the city as classroom. So there is, this decentralizing is so important. It's a great thought. So what new toy do you suggest?
And what new toy?
Yeah,
Well, the synthesizers come a long way.
I like that.
I love synthesizers. I just got, like, for my iPad, I got like an Animoog Z. It's sort of it's one of the coolest synths ever. Moog, Moog, Robert Moog was obviously a great genius of sound.
He is very cool. So, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Gee, I worry about everything. No, I don't really. I used to do a lot of worrying. Now I take beta blockers. No. My anxiety levels have decreased a lot since I started a regular meditation practice, really, and a hatha yoga practice.
That is good. I like those. So McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might be able to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
We choose to ignore them. They don't fulfill the social stimuli. They're taboo.
Taboo.
Our unconscious is the greatest taboo.
Yeah. Do artists have moral obligation?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, Ezra Pound, you say Ezra Pound, I think Nazi.
Yeah. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I'm not afraid of any ideas.
Very good.
I love ideas.
Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
My drum, when I was about 2, I got this little drum.
Nice.
Drive my parents crazy.
Drumming at 2. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
It's both.
Yeah.
Definitely. No, I mean, it depends. It depends. I was thinking about, like, how my character in this new book I'm writing deals with, his emotions, really. And the way he tricks himself is just making a joke about everything internally. He doesn't even have to express the joke out loud, but he's got a well-developed sense of irony. It's like be joyful but expect disaster, sort of thing.
Beautiful attitude. I love that. I try to practice that. Tell me someone, please, within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
A role model.
Or just someone who had an impact on you, just briefly, within your family and outside your family.
Well, I blamed Bob Dylan for most of my problems. I came to America seeking the cosmopolitan riches of the mind, and actually I found it, I got involved with the sort of countercultural crowd, the drug elite and the poets and, I unfortunately saw the counterculture being crushed and co-opted.
Hello.
You know, by the time I lived in America, it was sort of not present in the cities, was it?
Well, you hear that. I have a lecture on Joni Mitchell's lines. We were hippies, then we became yippies, and now we're all yuppies.
I remember that, yeah. I wrote the song once. I was a hippie once. Before they dropped the bomb in 81, I was a hippie once.
How about inside your immediate family? Anybody who had an impact on you majorly, and what was that impact?
I don't know, you know, my father had a terrible impact on me. That impact was that, you know, my father was sort of engineering mentality sort of bloke who disapproved of poets. And that had a terrible impact on me.
Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
A bit Jewish, you know. But it's not the religion wasn't really the ideology, you know. I mean, I grew up in South Africa, so there's a whole other layer of trauma to deal with there, you know.
Yeah. Do you pray?
Do I pray? No, I meditate.
Yeah.
Praying is like, I guess, if I get desperate enough, like anyone else, I say, God help me, you know.
If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Oh, I've got a whole fucking list of questions of like why? Like this is like I want a full explanation, you know. Why sex, for example? I mean, it's a good idea, but sort of messy, you know. You know, why 2 sexes, not 5? You know,
Right.
You know, there's a lot of questions. I mean, not just sex. You know, there's just like why suffering? You know,
Why
how about
suffering?
the food chain? How about having to eat each other in this vicious manner to survive? You know, I mean, I demand a full explanation. You know, I mean, you know, any traditional God would smite me immediately. So,
Well, listen, I'll tell you, 80 to 90% of people go, what do you want God to tell you after you die? You did a good job. When someone like you says that, it really gives me hope because there's like what, you know, that was a much broader, comprehensive approach to this possibility, but who knows? Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I think, well, yeah, I think there's a lot of evil people, particularly, you know, those that it's the same kind of racists that, you know, constructed apartheid. Very similar genre of people have. That's what the right wing in this country is. You know, they're basically Christian nationalists, which was the official religion of apartheid. You know.
Yeah.
And what they're trying to do is bring apartheid to the USA. You know, I wish they would just take off the veil. You know, I mean, it's because they become more nakedly racist. But then it just shocks me, like, you know, for example, how many black people there are in the Republican Party or Latinos. You know, I mean, it's basically a racist party. It's a party founded on the principles of, you know, white ethno nationalism. You know, the Christian is just, the Bible is a very good source of talking points for them, but you know.
Well, the hidden question really, Robert, is that how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Fullest from samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
It's a difficult question, because, there are some nasty people in the world, and I think they should be called out. I think that they should be exposed. But as far as dealing with them goes, is you got to get inside their symbolic systems and attack them from within. So I mean, like for example, the similarities between Donald Trump and the predictions of the Antichrist are actually quite astounding. He lives at 666. He's got like his followers wear the sign on his forehead. It's just basically, he's the Antichrist. He fits the definition, and in the prophecies. So a little campaign among the evangelicals could probably, nudge some to actually think about what they're doing.
I love that verb nudge. I think it's an important thing. I always strive to do nudging, but it begs this sort of follow up is Nassim Taleb said, games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. Then someone followed up and says, well, villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And Gregory Bateson said, when the criminal gets caught, does he go, oh, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, wow, I did something morally and socially wrong? So it's a lot of prompts, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
Punishments. No, not physical punishment. And, I mean, putting people in a jail that's organized along racial lines is basically, subjecting someone to, institutional violence. It's not going to improve anyone's personality. Yeah. I think, basically what we've got to hope for, which is I can't say I have much hope of achieving, is, mass awakening to our own unconscious urges. That's the only thing that would really improve the humanity, I think. It seems like otherwise we're doomed to go in these cycles of, love and hate. Fear and joy,
Yeah. Well, James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
There's also this Umberto Eco book called Travels in Hyperreality.
Yeah.
It's about how Americans prefer a perfect replica to the original.
Yeah.
So why? Because we can, actually, I created and patented an AI system called Protagonist a few years back, which sort of, a universe of narrative symbols, of stories, symbols that occur in stories.
Yeah.
And, those are really the symbols that drive us. But we encapsulate them in these dramas to virtually live out the mythology, But I actually just recently read this quote. I think it started off quoting Leonard Cohen going into, when he was in his monastery, and he realized that, the hero is entirely the wrong stance to be the hero. The hero, because the hero suffers. The hero, goes into the underworld and gets enemies and allies and fights his way through to the end, and whereas happiness is actually abandoning the hero myth. It's like, just accepting accepting one's fate in a way, like accepting, one's own personality, and removing the oppression of having to be a hero. It's, you remove your suffering and you get happier.
I like that. Phil Spector had a gun up to Leonard's head one time and says, "I love you, Leonard." And he goes, "I sure hope you do."
Yeah. What a fucking weird.
Actually, we're going to get into Leonard when we get into music here for a second. But Robert, just walk me through sort of your briefly your tipping points. When did you go, I want to write music and lyrics? Where's your tipping point? And then when did you
walking down the street in Johannesburg, in downtown Johannesburg, and there was a record store, and there was one record in the window had a picture of a guy sitting on some stairs in a kind of very, loud shirt with someone standing next to him holding a camera. And I thought, that's fucking intriguing. And I went in the store and I bought this record called Highway 61 Revisited. And that was the end of me. Was a
that was the end of you. And so what's the tipping point for pursuing AI in that other part of your,
it came from breaking my leg in New York City. I broke in 1987. I broke my leg and I was laid up for a long time. I had the little Mac Plus, and Mac Plus had a little program called VideoWorks. And that was around the time that my friend Steve Johnson had just made that Peter Gabriel Sledgehammer video with all the pixelation. I don't know if you remember it.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah.
And so I started doing these little animations. There was a program called VideoWorks on the Mac. And I started doing these little animations. And a few months later, I was back in LA and I went to visit Steve, and he was walking into his house carrying a little Mac just like mine. And I showed him my animations, and he invited me to do an animated piece for the Amnesty International Human Rights Tour. And shortly after that, I met this guy, Jim Mervis, who saw my graphics and my interactive stuff and asked me to work with him on A Brief History of Time CD-ROM. And I did that. And while I was doing that, someone who worked with me on that project knew this guy, Ken Colby, out in Malibu, who had written Parry. Parry was the sort of the first AI ever to pass the Turing test. It was a computer simulation of a paranoid. Ken was a psychiatrist, and he was like the real, became my like natural language guru. You know,
Nice.
he understood what not to do with natural language processing, and so he had this program called Overcoming Depression, which was like a, you know, simulation of a psychiatrist, really, of him, his own psychiatric methods and all that. Because Ken believed that a human would, you know, say things to a computer that they wouldn't say to anyone, therapist or not, you know. It was a much more neutral venue for psychiatry. Anyway, so I did this animated face called Dr. Phoenix, and we put it on top of Ken's program, and that was I had this psychiatrist living in my house for, you know, a long, long time, and people used to come and say, "Oh, can I speak to the doctor?" Put him on with Dr. Phoenix, and you know, it was pre-internet, so it was just sort of just on my local computer, Dr. Phoenix. And then this was seen by this guy, Adam Linter, who had this children's newspaper. And he commissioned me to do this game called Scoop, in which we built 25 interactive characters who you had to, it was for kids, but to teach them journalism. But you had to interview the characters and write a story based on their interview. And we had, it was quite a project. We had Larry King was like your mentor in the story, and Ed Bradley, you know, the Washington Post editor, was
Right.
like the mentor, your mentor, taught you, you know, how to write journalistic stories. And so after that, then the internet came along, and I started this company called Talkie, where we did like more than, you know, 50 or 60 interactive characters for corporations. Like for Sprint, we did this huge project which taught people to use 16, you know, phones, different kind of phones with all the functions. And it was an interactive character, like, you know, Siri or Alexa, or whatever, but this was, you know, 10 years before then. And it was embodied. And then, so after that, I got really interested in doing this narrative thing, and I wrote this protagonist system, which is, you know, it says characters who act out scenarios pushing a human along a timeline, a narrative timeline. So you can be the hero without having to be the hero in real life. So you know, so you're in the movie, but you're the protagonist of the movie. And my characters protagonist characters ensure that you push you along a narrative timeline.
That was very rich, and you've accomplished a lot. Beautiful. And so let's stick to music for a few minutes here. A screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing a song?
I think it plays a lot, you know. I mean, well, you know, I don't think that when you're writing a song, actually let me revise that, because I think the best way of writing a song is to get the fuck out of the way.
Yeah.
Use my language there, but you know, as William Burroughs used to say, exterminate all rational thought. You know, you want to get yourself out the way and let the song come out of you like you're an instrument, you know. You've got to have all the equipment of the instrument, which is the language and the rhyming skills and the metaphoric skills, you know. And, you know, but once that exists, and the chord structure and song structure, all those, and what instrument, etc., all the musical skills, you need all that. But once you're actually writing a song, get your mind out of the way and let the song come through you.
It's a high aspiration. A lot of musicians tell me that, Robert. And Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your listener when you're writing your song?
I'm not really thinking about it, but I don't have much of an audience. It's like Jeff Buckley's record with Gary Lucas, my friend Gary Lucas. He says it was called "Songs for No One," right? It's because who the fuck listens to your music? I've got about a couple of 100 fans, but
I've asked. It's funny. I've asked Gary Lucas all these same questions. So yeah, he's an amazing musician. I love
Gary. He's a real blast. I used to go and jam with him in West. He lives in this artist building right on the river in New York.
Yeah,
he's just a great guitar player.
He's a great guitar player, and his work with Beefheart's amazing, and his work post Beefheart has been amazing too. So, McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. So, knife and fork extends our teeth. Shutter and a camera extends our eyelid. Even non-tangible like religion or philosophy might extend consciousness. What does the guitar extend for you? Or what's your main instrument, guitar or keyboards?
Well, guitar is my native instrument.
So what is the
keyboards a lot?
Right. What does the guitar extend? What humanness does the guitar extend for you?
The guitar is like the heart. It's like an organ of the body.
Yeah.
It's the closest to the heart you get, I think. Closer than the piano. Although, I'd say some horns are pretty good at expression on that level. But guitars have come a long way. But now the synthesizer, I must say, has definitely sort of got just as interesting for the advancement of music into the next era.
It's amazing. What's the function of music?
The music is the spiritual part of our lives,
Yeah.
You look at all these religions. What do you go to church? What do? You sing, you go to, it's all about music. They could do without the ideology and just have the music, and then you have basically America. Just think of concerts. Now it's like people just spend their lives at concerts. Like the concerts, it's amazing how huge some of these concerts are.
Yeah. Well, my friend calls the 3 T's of music technique, theory, and taste. So you can learn how to play the guitar. You can learn the theory. What structure is it? How does one acquire taste?
I don't know if I agree with his theory, but
well, it's just a thought of the 3. I mean, I'm always welcome to adding more, but he just sort of reduced it down to those, and it's not exclusively those, by saying the question is basically that comparison to technique and theory aside, how does one acquire taste? Like, how did you gravitate towards Bob Dylan and not, say, someone else? There's so many.
It was his understanding of how words work.
Yeah.
Take me disappearing through the smoke rings of my mind,
Yeah.
down the foggy ruins of time,
Yeah.
That's it. That's really what it. And he had some good melodies. Like I'm a big fan of the early Dylan, and I said to Rob Stone on Facebook, I think he got a bit upset that not even no one can do Dylan like Dylan, not even Dylan.
Right. My line is, Dylan's worse than Dylan. But here's I love,
My
but
label is called Sub Bob.
oh, Sub Bob, that's good. B-O-B, Sub Bob.
Yeah.
Sub Bob, that's good. Well, so Copeland says the four elements or ingredients of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. First of all, how would you explain what is tone color to the average person, not in musical terms? What is tone color to the lay person?
It's the feeling that the music creates.
It's good. Then how do you integrate those four? Melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. Is there one that plays a bigger role, or is there a process you use in integrating those four elements?
Yeah, I mean, that's the process of recording music, You've got, you got to make it sound good. You got EQ, you've got compression, you got all these fantastic tools, all these wonderful plugins now. It's like, so that's the recording, but there's the original idea, that's hopefully the most spontaneous part. And then there's the inspiration and the instrumentation, it's all about sort of doing something that hasn't been packaged quite in that way, ungenericizing things, just trying to find new ways of expressing things, expressing ideas, expressing feelings, new combinations of, the 12 notes available to us.
Yeah. But you don't gravitate more towards melody, harmony, or rhythm when your ritual of writing a song or any sort of process in writing. Like they ask the Brill Building songwriters, what comes first, the melody or the words? And they go, the phone call.
Yeah, well, they were professionals like that, but
But I mean, do you have a preference, like melody, harmony, or rhythm when you're writing a song?
No.
It just, yeah.
I try, I'm trying to exterminate rational thought at that point,
Yeah.
And the best way is like to just open yourself up to it and see what comes out to start with, because you're thinking about the things that concern you or the topics that, your favorite topics of the moment are there in your mind, but maybe you're not expressing the feelings that go along with them. And, that's the melody, is those feelings that go along with the thoughts that you're expressing. But, if you know what you're doing, then, as far as just, about how chords work and, what a relative minor is or whatever, that you don't really need to think about it, and thinking just gets in the way, really.
Well, Monk says there are no wrong notes. Any comment?
Melodious funk, you mean?
He said, what I like is, my friend says, Thelonious Monk heard all the notes Charlie Parker heard, but only decided to play some of them.
That's good. Yeah. Did you read his autobiography?
I haven't. I would love to.
You got to read it, but it's called Beneath the Underdog.
Oh no, that's Mingus. Yeah.
Oh, that's Mingus.
Yeah, I've read that. Yeah, that's an amazing book. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I got them confused. Sorry.
But that's all right. But another one is Miles Davis. He said he talks about the space between notes. How did you learn to integrate silence and not playing? What's the function of silence in composing music?
Anticipation. I just, it's like, it reminds me of the story that I heard, I think Larry Klein told me about, um, about Miles. He says, Miles lived in Malibu and he drove a Ferrari, So this cop pulls him over. Miles says, when cops see a black man in a fast car, they got to pull him over. It's programmatic.
Programmatic.
So the cop comes up to him, winds down the window, and the cop says, "You know how fast you were going?" And Miles says, "I never watch the numbers. I just know when it sounds right."
Wow, that is great. That's a beautiful, what it sounds like. Yeah, Miles, amazing. So this is, first of all, tell me an instrumental that makes you laugh.
An instrumental that makes me laugh. The Secret Policeman. You ever heard that?
I don't know that. What is it? Well, who's the?
Goes on for quite a while.
Good. What's more fundamental, language or music?
I don't know. They're both pretty fundamental. They're both
Robert,
pretty, yeah. Go on.
Well, here's a few more questions about music. I'm curious. Ruth Draper says the key is to bring the audience up onto the stage and into the scene with you. It is they who must give you even more than you give them in the way of imagination and creative power. That sounds good, but how do you do that?
I don't know, it's the audience. An audience is like a source of energy in a way. And it's they that give you sort of like liberty to, get your yayas out, and inspire them to get theirs.
Well, that's the freedom thing. I want to talk to you about Huxley and your quote on him, freedom. But here's the Leonard Cohen.
Oh, but let me just add to that.
Please.
It's like from Performance. Do you remember that movie?
Oh, yeah.
It was based on the Borges tale, the theme of the traitor and the hero. But, the line is the only performance that counts is the one that inspires insanity.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Now, who said that?
I forget.
If you mean it's the script in Performance?
Yeah. It was either, Nicholas assassin.
The only what? Say the quote again.
I'll see if I can get it. I'm going to look it up here. The only performance that counts is the one that inspires insanity.
Oh, okay. That counts. Yeah, insanity. Yeah. That's good. Yeah, that's Nicholas Roeg, an amazing film.
Yeah, it is an amazing. And Donald Cammell, too.
Oh, and Donald Cammell, too. Yeah.
It says the only performance that makes it, that really makes it, that makes it all the way, is the one that achieves madness.
Yeah, good. Thank you so much, because this leads to Leonard Cohen. The only way you can sell a concert is to put yourself at risk. And if you don't do that, people know. What role does risk play in your creative process?
I don't know. Risk is everything is risky. I don't know. What motivates me at my advanced age to continue writing songs. I've been writing songs since I was 12, and I've achieved a little bit of success, you know, very here and there. You know, I was on Island Records and MCA Records for a bit, you know, and but you know, really, I mean, that made me very poor being signed to major labels, and you know, I've really never really had much success in music, but yet I continue. Why is this? Because I just love it. What can I say?
Well, what does courage mean to you now?
Courage. Gee, you know, my wife is really courageous. She's, you know, she was in jail in South Africa during apartheid for ANC work, you know. And she's been fighting for human rights all her life. You know.
Wow.
She was, you know, she was the chair of Amnesty International for a long time. But the Casa, you know, she's truly a courageous person. You know, but everyone is courageous if they get through their adversity, you know, without freaking out, you know.
Well, here's another strong woman, Viola Spolin. She's a social worker in Chicago who sort of helped start comedy improv. She says, if the audience cannot see your struggle to achieve something, they cannot root for you to achieve it. What role does struggle play in your creative process?
That's a good question. I don't know. I struggle to get it right, but I don't really struggle. I can't say. My creative process is not about struggle. It's about liberation.
Liberation. Great word. Yeah.
Free your mind and the rest will follow.
I asked George Clinton all these same questions too. In fact,
George Clinton, he's the one. Clinton, they should have, you know, elected. We would have been one nation under a groove. That's
totally Richard Pryor, Aretha Franklin. Chocolate City is all about what. Let's paint the white.
My song Reality. That's sort of in honor of George Clinton.
Yeah. This is George saying two of my favorite lines: paint the White House black, and then, brother, can you paradigm?
Yeah, you know, the truly most moving concert I ever seen, the deepest funk I've ever witnessed was at the Starwood. I don't know if you remember the Starwood.
Oh yeah, I know the Starwood.
The Brides of Funkenstein at the Starwood in 1970.
Oh my God.
And to top it off, I got mugged on the way home, walking down Santa Monica Boulevard. But this was the deepest funk. It like changed my life. This was the best concert I ever saw. And I was walking home, and these two big guys, one had curlers in his hair. And so the guy pulls out a gun and says, I've got a gun, give me your money. So I said to him, well, do you think if I had any money, I'd be walking right now? He says, well, how much you got? And I look in my pocket. I said, I got 25 cents. He says, I'll take it. I give it to him.
It's like Jack Benny, you know, his story. The guy comes up to rob him. He says, your life or your money? And Jack Benny goes, let me think about that. So, Robert, this has really been fun. We got a few more here. Ben Ratliff is a music writer. He says, I mean sound as it has long functioned among jazz players, as a mystical term of art, as in every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality, such that it can be heard at best in a single note. So me and you can hear Miles and go, oh, that's Miles. Ben described him in two words, fragile and pointed. Coltrane, slightly undercooked and urgent. If a music writer that you respect summarized your sound in a couple words, what 2 words would you feel they got it? You know,
what sound would be? That's a good question. Witty.
oh, I love that word. What's the second word?
Heartfelt.
Oh, dude, that's beautiful. I love that. What's the motive of the cave artist?
To understand himself.
Nice. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Conviction.
You've accomplished a lot. How do you rate these 3 elements? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
In that order.
Nice. A poet said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Poetry.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, you know, I think you quote one of my heroes, Gary Snyder, on your Frank Witness website.
Oh, yeah. One of my heroes, too.
Listen what Gary says about poetry. My task as a poet entails seeing the world without language, then putting that seeing into language.
That describes his poetry pretty well. I remember my favorite line from him. He says, "The deer come for salt, not affection."
Nice. Yeah, I asked him at the downtown library once. I says, you know, poetry is outing your inner dialogue. Can you tell me what language your inner dialogue is in? And he goes, no. And I realized I asked the question wrong. I says, tell me what language your inner dialogue. Don't can you? I learned a lot that day. But 2 of my film heroes have this mantra, ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression. In fact, Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
Well, I'm pretty sure you're a vehicle, but hopefully you're a vehicle of the spirit, you know, a vehicle of the universal spirit, like, you know, Woody Guthrie or something, you know.
The universal spirit, rather than, you know, my examples of technology, culture, because you'll love this. Ginger Baker, they said, where'd you get your drum sound? He goes, I was in London when they were bombing. Boom, boom, boom. And then James Brown's drummer is like, you're the architect of funk drumming. Where'd you get your sound? He says, I was in Ohio as a kid, and on one side of my house was a train track, and the other side was a factory. So it was like, boom, boom, boom. You know, he just became what he heard, you know. But
I was like I write with these 2 young guys who used to be fans of Kanye West, or I think,
yeah.
And so I started thinking about how narcissistic all these, you know, these rappers are, you know.
Yeah.
And I wrote a song about a manic depressive called Narcissus Regret.
Yeah.
You know? But really, that's the sort of the narcissism is the perversion of music into ego gratification sort of thing.
Yeah, it's funny because I was going to give you one more example. The guy from Negative Land told me, Missy, whatever her name, I don't know her full name, a rapper, Missy something. She said, where'd you learn how to sing? And she said, from car alarms.
That's great.
That is like you. So
that's actually very, very telling, because, you know, the hardest thing in singing is to glissando your notes.
it's amazing. Right.
seamlessly from one note to the other. So
Yeah, because
that's a very smart reply she gave.
no, it was very smart. Oh, her name's Missy Elliott, in fact.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like, yeah, there, you know, you go, where'd you learn how to sing? In the church. If you're black, you always go in the church. Or, you know, you heard it from your parents' soul records. But to say that was an amazing statement. So the hidden question to that one where you answered it, universal spirit, beautiful answer was, can art making, music making be egoless?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
It aspires to being egoless.
Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
I don't believe in belief.
That's a great. That is great. Yeah, you know, Sun Ra got quoted in the New Yorker of all places. The impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change.
Oh, that's great. He was fucking great. He was a monster, eh?
Tell me one major element of your creativeness that's changed and one major element that stayed the same in the many years you've been doing it.
Well, I've learned how to mix, and I've learned, you know, a lot about recording in the last few years, and really how to get a good sound and how to get rid of nasty frequencies and, you know, boomy things. That's changed. I've also got a piano. I bought a piano, you know, just the other day, or not the other day, but a year ago, and I decided I'd give myself a year to learn how to play Dorian mode like McCoy Tyner, you know.
Nice. That's a great.
It's taking me longer than I'd planned, but you know, it's like a whole another dimension. The piano, you know, I've always wanted to get into, but never had a piano, and so. And I've got, you know, some great synthesizers now. It's like getting into synths. I just, you know, they've got to the level of brilliance that the electric guitar sort of got to in the 60s, you know.
That's great aspiration to play like McCoy because, you know, Michael Nesmith was with Frank Zappa once and he's driving him home from a set and he goes, dude, can you teach me how to play like Hendrix? And Frank just sort of laughed. So one day there's this one lick I love that Keith Jarrett plays, you know, on piano, and I just love it. And I know it's not that complex. So one day I went over to Steve Weisberg, who that's how we met, through the great Steve Weisberg. And I said, Steve, can you teach me how to play this lick? You know, like, it was really simple, but it was so funny. Like, can you teach me? So
Steve is quite amazing too.
Steve is amazing.
I'm actually very, you know, I'm friends with Arthur Barrow, who he was.
Yeah, I know Arthur.
Yeah, and they invited me to some of his jams at his old studio, and just the level of musicianship of that Zappa crowd is just blew my fucking mind. You know?
Oh, Tommy Mars is a dear friend. You should see.
Tommy came and the Fowler brothers.
Yeah.
You know, and
well, we just put out 25 years ago. Susie did a 40-minute set with Tommy Mars.
Well, Susie is a great vocalist.
But you got to see this. It's at the Cantor's Kibitz Room 25 years ago. It is an amazing 45-minute set of Tommy Mars with Susie. It's unbelievable.
Nice.
So, anyways, what's one element that stayed the same in the many years you've been doing this?
Me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still, you know, like the same personality I had when I was 18 years old. I haven't really changed that much.
Yeah. Well, Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength. rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
My vocals. I'm not a very good vocalist.
And then how did you flip it into a strength?
I tune my vocals. No, I practice. You know, my shortcoming is that I don't practice singing, and I don't practice much of anything. And so, if I impose upon myself some, daily practice, I definitely improve. And the pranayama and the meditation definitely improved my my singing, just from all the breathing exercises I do. And I watch a lot of videos, and I've got a few apps to improve my singing, I just watched this video recently where this teacher, this music teacher, singing teacher, explained the 3 different voices. And it was a very simple idea, but, it just actually explained a lot to me about how to sing, I keep on learning. One of these days I'll be a good singer.
Fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive emotion
when it's channeled in the right direction.
Utah Phillips says anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
I think we have a collective moral sense, and I think that that is the rule book. I don't think
collective moral sense. That is great. So you're saying the collective moral sense is probably innate in humans?
Yeah. It is. It's like how these drugs like Prozac and all those serotonin reuptake inhibitors work, Now they discovered it was, sheep and humans are the only animals where a baby is entirely dependent on the mother. And so they monitored the brain chemistry of a lamb, and they withdrew the baby from the mother and started bleating, and they noticed a rapid drop in the serotonin count, and they put it back closer to the mother, and serotonin count elevated again.
Amazing.
That's how we're programmed.
Well, you talked about identity. Both Christian Murdy and McLuhan both say that violence is the human search for identity. What's your thought on that? Because, we were talking about anger and how you channel it. And, my thought was, well, sometimes I wonder, is hating someone, is hate innate or is it invented?
Well, I think it's innate, but it's sort of self-defeating.
Yeah.
Hate is ultimately turns inward. And it kills itself, kills its host. I don't think, where it begins. I think it's it's just a part of fear, isn't it?
It's fear, yeah.
It's just, fear of survival. It's one of those questions I've got for, the afterlife. Why the food chain? That's sort of
yeah.
It's a very cruel system we got going there.
Yeah. Well, what is free? You have that quote by Huxley. One believes themselves to be free. It's about mind manipulation. It reminds me of the subgenius line. pull the wool over your own eyes.
Yeah, I love that.
What does freedom mean to you now?
Freedom means, to be able to continue to be creative without anxiety. That's freedom to me. Anxiety is the fear, the fight or flight response. If we can sort of keep that out of ourselves, we'll be much happier.
Well, there's a line, Robert, that goes, you create what you resist. I'm not saying you, but one creates what one resists. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So what's your thoughts on this line? You create what you resist. Not you, but one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that?
I don't know, but it brings to mind the story about Einstein and Niels Bohr,
Yeah.
Einstein went to visit Niels Bohr one day, and he saw a big cross over the door. And he said, Einstein says to Bohr, he says, I thought you didn't believe in that. He says, oh, no, it brings you luck. I said, but I thought you didn't believe in that. He says, it works whether you believe it or not.
Yeah.
So, it's basically all this. I think anger, I don't think anger is ever productive, really. I think it stands in the way of productivity, of expression,
Yeah, when Paul Krasner asked some guru, why is there evil? He said, to thicken the plot.
Oh, I love that, yeah. It's also very true because, without evil, there wouldn't be a plot. You wouldn't have the hero's journey.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm very tied up with, I'm sort of here indirectly because of Paul Krasner.
Are you really? Beautiful. One of my heroes.
Yeah, Jeannie Johnson. Did you know Jeannie? She lived with Paul for 40 years or so.
Yeah.
And she married me to get me in the country. And she wrote on them immigration form. Anyway, this was a long time ago.
That's perfect lead in, dude. This is amazing because one of my favorite, I can quote a lot of Krasner lines, and one of my favorites is, I only believe in reincarnation in one of my past lives.
That's great.
But you said plot, and this great line from Hollis Frampton is, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. Can you forget to die?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to really struggle to die.
Yeah.
I watched my mother dying, and very sort of difficult, to let go, even though she was in terrible pain.
How do you find peace of mind?
With difficulty, with drugs and meditation and yoga. Cannabis helps.
We got about 5 more minutes, Robert. This has really been fun, and I really appreciate your time. Couple more and we're out of here. These are 5 Alan Watts questions just off the top of your head in a couple words. Number 1, who started it all?
No one.
Are we going to make it?
Depends where we think we're going.
That's a good answer. 3, where do we put it?
That's the Stephen Wright conundrum. He says, you can't have everything. Where would you put it?
That's a good. I met him on the Venice boardwalk once, and I went
Oh,
up to him.
really?
I says, "Would you read Growing Up?" And he goes, "Vonnegut." I goes, "Okay, thanks." That was
makes a
it.
lot of
It's like,
sense.
boom. Number 4, who's cleaning it up?
What makes you think it needs cleaning?
Oh my God, you've knocked it out of the park on 2 of these. You should hear the answers I get on these 5. That is a great answer, Robert, because you flipped it. Everybody's like, who's cleaning it up? Oh, blah, blah, blah. It's amazing. You flipped it. Okay, the 5th Alan Watts is it serious?
No.
Yeah.
But we think so. We think so, but we're wrong. That was actually this, get off the hero's journey quote, All these people, I've been reading about all sorts of people's DMT experiences, and a lot of them are kind of, you take yourself far too seriously.
Oh, yeah. Very much. In fact, Frank Zappa says, I'm very serious about being not serious. And so back to that, I asked my friend who wrote Comedy with Robin Williams, can satire be destructive? And he says, that's the job of satire. But, if me or you do a cartoon in a certain country and they kill us, some people think death is destructive. Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own.
Oh, lovely.
And Zappa said, watch the Nazis run your town. Now go home and check yourself. You think we're singing about somebody else. So what's the function of satire?
Point out the delicious ironies in the world.
Yeah. What's the function of laughter?
Laughter is the greatest drug of all.
Yeah.
It's release and liberation of irony.
Very good. Gurdjieff said laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no.
Well, that's nice.
But McLuhan loved to quote Steve Allen, behind every joke, there's a grievance. Just drop the word every. Behind joke, there's a grievance. What's your take on that line?
I don't agree with that. I mean, there's like I sort of go with Freud on it. It's like a joke is what breaks the punchline is a breaking of a paradigm. There's some sort of expected paradigm, some sort of standard ending to things, and the punchline is a shock to the system.
Yeah, that's really good. A joke breaks a paradigm. I like that. I need that one. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Don't cry.
Oh, God. That is heavy. That is heavy, dude. Okay. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
I have no preference.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
True stories are made up.
They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Jasmine.
If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed, and what would it be made of?
Under the ocean, and it'd be made of seaweed.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
A fast car.
That's a good answer. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Suffer.
Suffer. That is a good. Well, your answer, don't cry. One of my favorite answers is Mike Kelly, the great artist. He goes, cry.
Oh, really?
No, actually, you'll love this. This is the best answer ever. This woman on the Venice boardwalk, I'm just like, you know, you're in a vat of vomit, someone throws a bag of shit at you. She goes, I'd take the velocity of the bag of shit and use it to swoop my way out of the vat of vomit. I says, dude, that is Edgar Allan Poe's Descent into the Maelstrom. It was an amazing thing how we're swimming in sensory overload. We can use it to, you know, survive.
Yeah, we are, you know, definitely sensory overload. You know, it's actually Oz did these experiments back in the 60s where he had like a geodesic dome with like about 30 or 40 different TV sets in it. And people would go in and they would be, you know, they would be stimulated like by all these, you know, different feeds. And they'd come out and some of them would have headaches and some of them would be disoriented, but they'd all want to go back. That was the terrible thing that he noticed.
Oh, yeah.
No matter how bad the experience was with sensory overload, they would want to repeat it. It's addictive.
It's funny. There's a cult film called Eat the Sun, and it's about people who worship video feedback. It's the same thing. And I've studied this for years, Robbie, because the first time we sort of saw multiple screens was Man Who Fell to Earth, the movie by Nick Rogue. You know, David Bowie's watching like 17 screens at once. Previous to that, Nixon and Elvis were the known people who watched multiple screens, multiple TV screens at the same time.
And
now,
guards, right?
Yeah, now that's all everyone does is watch multiple screens their whole life. It's like, you know, and
it's
then there's
screen.
Yeah,
and COVID has made it worse, hasn't it?
Yep. How has your creativeness in your AI pursuits, your CD-ROMs, your animation, your making music, how has that shaped your behavior?
Entirely.
But how?
How? Well, you know, I'm very creative, and that's all I do is think of, you know, new songs, new apps.
Yeah.
New, you know, everything. Just
newness.
What? It's not the newness that's the appeal, but I just have this sort of like overactive imagination, I guess.
Yeah. What question remains unresolved for you?
All of them. It's true.
Couple more and we're out of here. Beautiful. Thank you. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
I think we're over this sort of disinformation era. I think we're, you know, approaching a time where, you know, being semi-reasonable is the value of being reasonable has returned.
Beautiful. I like that. Thornton Wilder said in 1928, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Continuous creativity, you know, continuous enjoyment of the playfulness of my brain, you know.
Playfulness is a great word, dude. Continuous creativity. I like that. What gives you the most optimism?
It's innate joy, you know. That's, you know, at the end of one of my meditations, I do these guided meditations, you know. I always wait for the teacher to say, innate joy. And I experience it, you know, occasionally.
Do you have to run? Because I got a couple bonus questions if you can.
I'm okay. I'm fine.
Because there's another thing on your website that I like, trying to get down to the truth.
I'm trying to get down to the truth of this.
Yeah, and this is Louis Buñuel said, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. So everybody goes, that's great. I agree with that. And one person said, that's bullshit. Because if I'm going to seek something, it's because I want to find it. So the cliche is the journey's more important than the destination. Why do we have to name or seek a destination if the journey's more important?
Because it validates our actions.
Yeah.
But I'm not a believer in, I think there is actual truth. And, you know, there's bullshit. And I'm part of the anti-bullshit alliance, you know. I'm sure you will join me. There's, you know, these vast propaganda efforts that distort the truth. But there's a sort of innate truth in humans that, you know, like the innate joy and the innate, and, you know, no one can really, the stuff that's beyond definition, like love, you know, which is, you know, I think of the T.S. Idiot line. He says, every attempt is a raid on it, the inarticulate, with shabby equipment, always deteriorating. You know, that's, we're trying to uncover the deeper truths.
Well, that goes with another person you quote on your site. I'm curious. Lacan, you know, we choose to ignore the unconscious. How do you separate what is conscious, subconscious, and unconscious? And are we, you know, like the neuroscientists say, you know, oh, like what's his name? George Lakoff says, dude, we're run by our subconscious or unconscious 80%. Like, what is your feelings on this Lacan quote you put on about unconscious?
You know, that was like a real turning point for me, because it already sort of crystallized a lot of things I've been thinking about for a long time, you know. And it's true. I agree with Lakoff, you know, that most humans are being driven by the unconscious, by their own unconscious most of the time. I don't think that, I don't think about subconscious, unconscious, you know.
Right.
But I do think about this sort of symbolic system that underlies our actions and that we don't pay any attention to. You know?
Well, it's sort of like, it begs the question, you know, does destiny control us or do we control destiny? And it's even more practical in this term. Is longevity in life more lifestyle choice or more DNA?
Combination of the two.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's more one or the other. It depends on, you know, I mean, if you have issues you don't deal with, you know, that are passed down through your genes, like medical conditions and stuff, but there's ways to deal with them, aren't there? So longevity is controlled about what your condition is and how you deal with it.
Yeah, it's like raising your awareness level. So yeah, I really want to thank you, because the first question I ask is, what's the best thing for a human being? And you said kindness, and that was really good. And in fact, you said human kindness. Wilhelm Reich says the best thing for a human being is another human being. And the last question is, what gives you the most optimism? That came from what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life.
Oh, really?
And Groucho said, other people. You know, spent his life cutting down other people, but he needed other people.
Oh, the Marx Brothers were just such a wonderful combination of the different elements, you know, the verbal, the non-verbal, etc.
Yeah.
And, you know, he said
Great,
some deep things.
great musicians too.
Yeah.
Chico's piano player and always gets me.
Who? Chico's?
Chico Marx. Watch him.
Chico.
Watch him play piano on YouTube. It's just like,
oh yeah, I've seen a lot of.
I mean, there. Forget McCoy Tyner. Study Chico Marx piano.
It's true. I remember. I mean, I can visualize his.
Yeah.
His
Anyways, thank you so much. This has really been enlightening.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed this, Jerry.
Yeah. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope we can keep talking forever and ever.
Well, thank you, man. It's really been wonderful.
Thank you so much, man.
Cheers.